Have you ever had an idea for a game so good that it was just destined for the top? You were so sure it would reach a level of success so high that you would be seen as one of those indie success stories. Yeah, me too. I predicted my game would make $15,000. You want to know how much it made? Under $2,000. Let's break that down. I spent 2 years part-time working on it. Let's say 2 hours a day for 700 days. That's 1,400 hours. This is an estimate, but should be pretty close. If I worked a job where I made $10 per hour, which is pretty low, I would have made $14,000. I made under $2,000. Now I know, money isn't everything, and I have learned many lessons and skills from this experience. But you have to be honest with yourself about your failures, and this was my biggest one. Experience had and skills learned are valuable, but they don't put food on the table at the end of the day. Rattle, Hell Unleashed was a very ambitious project for me. I started developing it in 2019 and finally released it 2 years later into early access. 2 years is a long time for one person to work on one project, but there were many reasons for its untimely release, which I'll talk about, but by far the biggest reason was scope creep. Creating video games is many things. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it's soul crushing, and rarely it's very rewarding. One thing it is not though, is easy. In the case of Rattle, Hell Unleashed, I didn't have a real plan. You see, I like to develop games, but I don't like talking about those games I made, and I don't like marketing them. I know enough to be honest with myself and admit that these are my weaknesses, and I think many of you are like me. It's good and a necessity to be honest with yourself. What are your best skills? Is it art, coding, music, marketing? You will need to at some point decide which skills you are best at and stick to those. It's better to do one thing right rather than two things wrong. People will often say, you can do it all. But to some extent, I don't think that's true. I did it all with Rattle, Hell Unleashed, and that's why I failed. Now, I know, believe me, I know, that you need a budget if you want to get people to help you with your projects. And that isn't always possible. Let's be honest, it's mostly impossible for us indies, without any hits or recognized titles. So we need to be smart, allocate our time effectively, and budget very cleverly. I didn't do these things well enough, and that's why I failed. Let's get to it. Here are the reasons why my indie game was a failure. Reason number 1. Scope creep. Ideas are sometimes better in your head than they are in real life. Sometimes it takes weeks to add a simple thing to your game that you decided to add by happenstance, because it seemed like it would be cool in your game. These can be new areas for your player to explore, new weapons or tools for the player to use, new systems to make the game more complex, or even new features to improve the game overall. These things I mentioned can be the death of your game. Don't believe me? When I started making Rattle, Hell Unleashed, the game was supposed to be a medieval steampunk shooter with 3 guns, around 5 types of enemies, and 6 levels. That's it. Do you know what it ended up as? A medieval fantasy shooter, where you had a crossbow with 4 types of arrows, 3 types of grenades, 4 types of spells, an upgrade system to upgrade all of them, buffs in the world to help you, around 10 types of enemies, and 13 levels. I just kept adding things and adding things for no reason. Each level needed its own set of enemies, its own set of assets, for the world and for the layout. This can be months of work per level, especially if you do it yourself like I did. I did everything myself. I added levels that were never seen or never meant to be there, just because they sounded cool in my head. You know how many extra sales that made me? 0. 0 sales. No one cared, only I did. If I could do it over, I would have kept the game small and short, and it would have made the same or probably even more money than it did. especially if I had allocated some of that wasted time to marketing. On top of that poor planning, I had to crunch to get all of these silly inclusions done. I sacrificed my mental and my physical health and sat and worked for weeks on end, even weekends, for additions to a game that nobody knew existed. Do not do that. Reason number 2, poor discipline and poor time management. I'm someone that has a million ideas floating around my head every day. I would start with a project, work on it for a couple of weeks, and then abandon it to start something new and fresh and better. To be successful in game development, you will need to develop incredible discipline. When you start something, you finish it. This is a skill I'm still learning, but I am getting better at it. Another point here is to make a schedule for your work and to stick to that schedule. This can also be challenging, as you'll get bored and want to fill your time with other things. But it is a necessity if you want to reach an ultimate endpoint. Carve out a piece of your day, let's say a few hours from 9 AM to lunchtime, and stick to it. I didn't do this enough during the development of my game, and this was a big factor to its ultimate failure. Reason number 3, terrible marketing practices. If you know me, you know that I hate marketing. Sitting at my desk and promoting my game to random people that I'll never meet or have a connection with just isn't my idea of a fun time. But here's the thing, fun isn't always going to be had when you do your work. Fun shouldn't be a driving factor. I know that I wasn't disciplined enough when it came to promoting my project. The truth is that there are many developers out there that want your game to fail. This isn't out of malice or spite, but rather necessity. You see, there's only so much real estate on the new releases page, and if you don't market your game and build up those wish lists before you attempt to launch, you won't make it. Now I know it's hard. Getting people to wishlist your game can feel impossible, and sometimes you'll feel like it's a losing battle. But it is what it is. You're in a position to pay for marketing, then do that. If you are not, like me, you will have to put in the time. If no one knows about your game, no one will buy it. Reason number 4. I didn't use enough store-bought assets. I have a store on the Unity Asset Store. I've had it for over 10 years and have made tens of thousands of dollars from it at this point. I'm not saying that to brag, because technically it should have made a lot more by now. Rather, I'm saying that to show you that I am no asset purist. I don't have any issue with people buying assets and using them in their games, because if I did, I wouldn't sell them myself. The problem is, for some reason, I only want to use my own art in my game, and this has been a major setback in my development career. I'm trying to teach myself that it is okay to use someone else's assets in my games, because that's what you would do if you hired an artist. Don't be like me. Instead of spending thousands of man hours to create things, just buy them for a couple bucks from the store. I promise you, no one cares. So those were the biggest reasons that I believed my game failed. I attempted too much and under-delivered on what I wanted to achieve and what I wanted to create. Now, I don't think my game is bad necessarily. I think it's fun, I think it looks good, and I think it plays well. But none of that really matters when you're trying to make money and build a business. It doesn't matter what you think about your game. It matters what your players think. If I can give you some advice, it would be this. Picture your game in your head, write down all the systems and all the assets you would need to make it happen. Plan out a schedule, no longer than 1 year, for your game's development. Do not deviate from that plan until you have finished your initial vision. Build a prototype. If it is fun, continue its development and see it through. If it isn't, scrap it. The truth is that not all ideas are worth creating. Learn from my mistakes and try to avoid these issues I spoke about in this video. I have some ideas on how to use the assets and systems I made for the game to make some money from them now and turn the game into a long-tail success through other means rather than just sales. If you guys would like me to create a video for my plans on that, please let me know. I hope you enjoyed the video. The previous one I made had a much bigger reception than I anticipated, so I hope you'll enjoy this one too. Let me know in the comments if you have had any failed projects. I would love to check them out and hear more about them. Subscribe to me and let me know if you enjoyed the video with a like. Until next time, see you.